I have been using a Lenovo Legion Go for the better part of 2 weeks now, and I am in love with this new PC handheld future. I've used a Steam Deck and only tried out an ROG Ally on display, but neither of them really has the versatility that the Legion Go does. Featuring a gorgeous 8.8-inch LCD display, very powerful internals, an excellent kickstand, and a very well-done detachable controller system, it all sounds like a winner. The Achilles heel for many will probably be its battery life though, which isn't the best in those big AAA titles when you're pushing performance. But let's dig into the details and go over the specs to see why I love this thing so much and if it's for you in the XboxEra review of the Lenovo Legion Go. Let's start with the specs, including the beefy CPU. It's an AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme with 8 cores, 16 threads, and a base clock of 3.3 GHz. GPU uses AMD's RDNA 3 architecture. RAM-wise, you get 16 GB of DDR5, which is soldered onto the board. But the storage, which is either 512 or 1 TB, is M.2 2242 size SSD and is user replaceable. Display-wise, you've got an 8.8-inch WQXGA 2560 by 1600 display. It's an IPS panel that is rated for 500 nits, is a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, and defaults to a 144 Hz refresh rate, though you can lower that to 60. It's also Corning Gorilla Glass 5. The speakers are up-firing stereo speakers. They're 2 watts, and there is a dual array microphone included into the chassis as well. For the wireless connectivity, you've got your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 5.1. There's a touchpad, which works really well. It's a little over a square inch in size. There's a 6-axis gyroscope sensor, an ambient light sensor, and a mouse sensor on the right controller that I'll talk about later. Ports-wise, there's a lot. You've got a microSD card reader, that headphone microphone combo jack, 2 pogo pins, 2 USB 4 40 gigabit per second USB-C ports that support data transfer, power delivery 3.0, and DisplayPort 1.4. The battery is a 49.2 watt-hour one that supports super rapid charging. That means 10 minutes for 0 to 30%, 30 minutes for 0 to 70%, or 80 minutes for 0 to 100% battery charge. Weight-wise, it is a chonky boy, coming in at 1.88 pounds, and it runs Windows 11. Out of all the handheld gaming-focused PCs I've seen, I do think the Go takes the cake for best overall specs. And having that user-serviceable SSD, microSD support, headphone jack, and everything else listed up above is a fantastic value for the cost of the machine. If you are into aftermarket parts, the Steam Deck is still going to be your go-to though. The Legion Go does run on Windows 11 Home, but it had no bloatware that I saw outside of its included Legion Space application. You've got 2 buttons, the Legion left and Legion right buttons on the top front of the device that are shortcut keys for it. The left brings up the app itself, and the right brings up an extremely useful shortcut menu. The Legion Space application will set to auto start when Windows loads up, and speaking of that, Windows loads very fast on this machine, with a cold boot taking roughly 20 to 30 seconds on average for me. Though your initial startup will require a typically lengthy Windows installation where you can log in with your Microsoft account or use one of the many Googleable workarounds to bypass creating one. The first thing I noticed was the incredible brightness and color quality in that display. It is LCD, and OLED is my normal favorite for gaming, but as far as LCD goes, this is one of the best I've used, with gorgeous colors and excellent contrast. Using Legion Space software, you can quickly swap between 3 resolution settings. Those are 1600p, 1200p, and 800p, as well as either 144Hz or 60Hz refresh rates. And while you can change that resolution at any time, you'll need to have the device plugged in to change the refresh rate, and I'm not sure why. Alongside those options are base settings to govern the power made available to the Go's included AMD chipset. That TDP governs how much juice that APU has, and you'll need to change things up depending on the type of game you want to play. Less demanding titles can run fine in the balanced setting with a high resolution and refresh rate, but the newer AAA graphical behemoths like Starfield will demand performance mode. And you can go in and set a TDP yourself anywhere from 1 to 30, with any number 20 or above, which is where performance mode starts, suggesting you probably want to keep the device plugged into the wall because it will burn through whatever charge your battery has in it quickly. Unlike the Steam Deck, this is a Game Pass powerhouse right out of the box, though it is much more of a computer experience than the Steam Deck's console-like one. The Legion Space software does have handy shortcuts to all the different PC launchers out there, and I quickly had Steam, the Xbox app, Ubisoft Connect, EA Play, Epic Games Store, Rockstar Launcher, GOG Galaxy, and more ready to go. If you haven't done PC gaming in a while, it is surprisingly cheap to get a massive library right away. And thanks to a ton of Humble Bundles, Epic Games Store giveaways, Steam sales, Game Pass itself, Xbox Play Anywhere, and more, I have like nearly 2,000 PC games ready to install between all of the launchers. For any Xbox fan, the most important launcher is going to be Xbox's own, and it works pretty well on a controller. A new compact mode has made it a little easier to read things on smaller screens, but it still lags behind the ease of use that you'll get with Steam's Big Picture mode. For all others, and I'm looking at you, Epic Games Store, you'll want to use the Go's touchpad. Located on the right joystick below the excellent analog stick, which I'll get onto next, the touchpad feels great and offers really satisfying haptic feedback when you use it. The joystick on both controllers are Hall effect sensors, which mean they use a magnet-based system to determine their position, which means far less, if ever any, stick drift concerns. In games where I could set the dead zone, I would put it at the lowest settings and have zero issues. It felt incredibly responsive, and the included toggleable RGB looks real nice, though it is far too bright at default for nighttime use. The face button, bumpers, and triggers are of a similarly high quality, with a number of extra buttons available on both sticks that you can program within the Legion Space app to behave however you want. The Go's biggest party trick, though, is its FPS mode on the right joystick. Using a switch on the bottom of the stick, you can detach it and then use another stick to swap over to FPS mode. Using an included plastic disc, this turns it into more of a flight stick setup and has it act as a mouse within Windows. There's a small mouse sensor on the bottom of the right joystick, and it legitimately felt pretty darn good to use once I dialed in settings and set the extra buttons to behave how I wanted. I used this mode quite a bit when the power supply in my PC exploded during a live stream, waiting for a PSU to come in from Amazon and praying that it would work, and thankfully it did once it did. I turned to the Legion Go to produce the XboxEra podcast for that week. Thanks to the Go's two total, one on the top and one on the bottom, USB-C 40 megabit per second slots, I hooked up a USB dock, which I used for HDMI out and daisy-chained to a powered USB hub. The bottom USB I used to keep the device powered up, and I set the TDP to its max of 30. The Go was a beast, handling two external monitors set at 1440p and 1080p respectively. I hooked up my mouse, keyboard, USB camera, USB webcam, and 3 external hard drives with zero issue. The thing is legitimately a PC replacement if need be, and while it pumped out a ludicrous amount of hot air through its top vent, the system itself never came close to overheating. The most important thing, of course, though, with this handheld is gaming on it, and it is awesome. For as long as it lasts. The Go has that just under 50 watt-hour battery, but it lacks the fine-tuning that Valve has put into the Steam Deck to maximize its performance while not draining the battery too quickly. If you are used to Windows 11 and willing to tinker with both the game and performance settings, you can get a decent amount of time for most titles. With the display set to 1200p and performance on balanced, I got nearly 3.5 hours out of Day of the Diver, but a more demanding title like Forza Motorsport needed the resolution lowered to 800p and settings to low if I wanted to play on anything below performance mode for the Go itself. It was perfectly playable for a few hours at those settings, but I admit, in general I parked myself next to the wall outlet by my couch so that it could race around at a mix of medium and high settings while playing at 1200p resolution while using that max 30 watt TDP setting. Putting everything to the lowest power usage and turning on YouTube at roughly a third peak brightness, I hit over 5 hours before getting any battery warnings. The included speakers are rather weak though, as they're upfiring, and unless you're aiming them at a wall, you need to have them near max volume to hear anything clearly. Thankfully, the Go includes Bluetooth 5.1 and that 3.5mm headphone microphone combo jack. Going back to that display, while it can run up to 1600p and look gorgeous doing so, I never really used it above 1200p for any serious gaming. It's only 8.8 inches large, and it really wasn't that noticeable until I dropped it all the way down to 800p, and the loss to FPS and battery life was just far too much of a trade-off. Weight-wise, the Go is a chunky boy, and there is no getting around it. After an hour or more of using it, depending on the position I was in, my hands would probably be a bit tired. Thankfully though, the ergonomics fit me and my giant hands really well, and I stopped noticing that weight after a week or so. As long as you have some decent Windows knowledge and are okay with tinkering a bit, you can get stellar performance out of any PC game that I threw at it. I played Starfield, Forza, Baldur's Gate 3, Red Dead 2, Immortals of Aveum, and a ton of other graphically demanding titles, and I could play them all. The most demanding titles like Immortals of Aveum did require lower settings and no higher than 1200p even on performance, but they still looked great and ran at a consistent 30 FPS or higher. I did have to visit Lenovo's website and find their new GPU drivers for the best performance though, as the ones that came with it out of the box had numerous issues in Starfield and other new titles, but once I manually updated them, everything ran just fine. Wrapping things up, starting at $699 US for the 512 gig model and going to $749 for the 1TB they sent me, the Legion Go is an excellent value, I think, even at that high price. It has an incredible display, a great feeling controller, at least for my huge mitts, and if you know your way around Windows 11, it is an insanely versatile device that could become many people's entire PC if need be. But hey, if you want to game on the go with Windows, this device is exceptional, for as long as the battery lasts.